So, what happened? Well, September 11th happened, obviously, and George W. Bush had to rethink. But for many of those around Bush, there was no rethink. There didn't have to be. Long before September 11th, a small, influential group of neoconservatives here in Washington had wanted to see the United States transformed into a sort of benevolent ruler, unchallenged, astride the world. And long before George W. Bush was elected, they sat down and they wrote down a manifesto. The document was effectively a charter of the Project for a New American Century, a neoconservative think tank in Washington.
The founding members included Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz of the Defense Department, Richard Pearl, head of the Defense Advisory Board, Louis Libby, Cheney's chief of staff, John Bolton, Undersecretary of State for Arms Control, Elliot Cohen, who's on the Defense Policy Board.
Much of what these men wanted is coming true. They urged that the U.S. abandon the anti-ballistic missile treaty. It has. They wanted establishment of more permanent U.S. military bases abroad. That is happening in the Philippines and in Georgia and will likely happen in Iraq. They urged regime change as a goal of foreign wars, not just in Iraq. They wanted the U.S. as a global constabulary, their word, unburdened by the UN or world opinion, preventing any challenge to U.S. dominance. But, they wrote, a year before September 11th, such aspirations are unlikely to be realized without a catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor.
For many Americans, the idea that we are living in a country whose own leaders planned and carried out the attacks of 9/11 is simply too horrible to entertain. Unfortunately, however, there is considerable evidence for this view.
See a pattern here. It seems evident to me that 9/11 was in effect a kind of pretext for the U.S. to expand its military hold on the two most important oil-producing regions of the planet.
I can only say the official story is so inaccurate and far-fetched that there must be a different one.
So they knew half an hour before the first plane, 3/4 of an hour before the second plane, and an hour and a half before the third plane hit their target. And not once in that time did they scramble a warplane to intercept. Now that is just staggering.
But the United States intelligence agencies has sophisticated software programs that are used in real time to watch both domestic and overseas markets to seek out trends that may indicate a present or future crime. In the week prior to September 11th, both the SEC and U.S. intelligence agencies ignored one major stock market indicator. On the Chicago Board Options Exchange during the week before September 11th, put options were purchased on American and United Airlines, the two airlines involved in the attacks. The investors who placed these orders were gambling that in the short term, the stock prices of both airlines would plummet. Never before on the Chicago Exchange were such large amounts of United and American airline options traded.
The fact that they were holding war games on the day that mimicked the actual attack scenario in every aspect, and then that afterwards they claimed we couldn't have imagined that such a thing would happen, although it was exactly the scenario that we were rehearsing. Hijackings, crashes into buildings, an emergency in New York City, all this was being rehearsed on the day as part of a plan. So when they say we couldn't have imagined it, they're lying.
We've now found out that there were 15 exercises going on that day involving all the fighter jets in the northeastern portion of the United States. What are the odds of that occurring?
Supposed to believe is some kind of coincidence. There was also an anti-terrorist drill going on 7/7. And again, just like 9/11, they were talking about attacks on the same targets, the same kind of tube stations, and exactly the same time as the actual attack happened.
September the 11th. September the 11th. September the 11th.
September 11th.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Hell yeah, bitches!
Certainly is a different look for Britney Spears, Mark and Michelle. With me now is Emily Wynn Hughes. Emily, you were inside the tattoo parlor when Britney arrived and got her tattoo, and you asked her why she shaved her head. What did she say?
She basically just said that she was tired of having things plugged into it and she didn't want anybody to touch her. Tired of people touching her, that sort of thing. It seemed like she was kind of sick of it all, whatever it all is.
Hey, look. Good. You know what kind they are?
No. All I know is that they came out of that test tube that you gave me.
I think another major area that I didn't mention is the anthrax attacks. And they are under the purview of the Commission. They were never touched. The anthrax, chemically and biologically analyzed, goes back to something called Project Jefferson, run by the DIA to create the next generation of anthrax on orders from Rumsfeld. They said on September the 9th, 2001, that they had succeeded, and then in October of 2001, the most weaponized and lethal anthrax ever seen shows up in the offices of the two major opponents of the Patriot Act.
Impossible to create legislation that sophisticated and that complicated in just a couple of weeks. Impossible. You sit down and read that stuff, it's hard even to get through it, and when you're a trained lawyer.
One element in this story is that these men were very devout, and so of course they were ready to meet their maker, and so going on a suicide mission would be no problem for them. The 9/11 Commission report said Mohammed Atta had become very religious, even fanatically so. Atta loved cocaine, alcohol, gambling, pork, and lap dances.
But, of course, we heard within days of the events that something like 5 or 6 of these people were still alive and well and living in the Middle East.
When you don't know their true identity, to have a report like this track them back through time encourages in what's called in intelligence parlance a legend. It's like the false Oswalds. They go someplace, they use a particular identity, they establish a trail that you are meant to follow, but it's a trail that gives you false sponsorship for the event. And in covert operations, you spend more time on that false sponsorship than you do on the event itself.
The Israeli government likely was conducting some kind of spy operation on U.S. soil in the run-up to the September 11th attacks. The best evidence that we have for this is, in fact, the story of these 5 moving men. Now, 3 of these guys were seen on the morning of September 11th, just after the first plane hit the North Tower, quote-unquote, celebrating on the New Jersey waterfront.
I grabbed my binoculars and I could see the towers from my window. And this is where I'm looking. And all of a sudden, down there, I see this van parked. And I see 3 guys on top of the van. And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me.
The celebration apparently consisted of high-fiving, according to one FBI official, of holding up cigarette lighters as if they're at a rock concert. So remember, the plane has just hit the tower, exploded in the tower, and these 3 men are behaving rather oddly.
A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins. But when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 911 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Wat je ziet bij het World Trade Center. Dit zijn beelden van gebouw nummer 7.
Ja.
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Totaal geen waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt.
Molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, you know, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath.
This is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot.
Metallurgists in Massachusetts had looked at World Trade Center 7 steel and some from the towers also. Strange, they said, that high temperature sulfidation. Where does this sulfur come? Where do these high temperatures come from? Well, the answer, you see, we're getting at, it's totally consistent with this thermate, you see? It's like a fingerprint that the criminal left behind. This carries with it evidence. How was this done? What was used? Brilliant reaction. You get this white flare, this white dust, which is aluminum oxide coming out, and then this yellow hot molten metal, just white yellow hot, flowing out of this reaction.
things, the good things that have been done, the reforms that have been made, the wars that have been stopped, was not done by government edict. It was not done by the three branches of government. It was not done by that structure which we learn about in junior high school, which they say is democracy. It was all done by citizens' movements. And then keep in mind that great movements in the past have risen from small movements, from tiny clusters of people that have gotten together here and there. Now, the movement's strong enough, it doesn't matter who's in the White House. What really matters is what are people doing, and what are people saying, and what are people demanding.
Be happy to see you and all your peanut guys doing the perp walk for your indiscretions with 9/11. We know that you all did it.
Buildings were turned into pulverized ash. Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex had the motive to carry out 9/11. And surprise, surprise, the evidence then shows that you're guilty as hell. We pay taxes to you just like you, and we demand answers. We demand the truth about 9/11.
Bush gave Cheney that authority in May 2001. Cheney was orchestrating all the war games that were being conducted on September 11th that you failed to address.
This is my daughter, Vanessa Langer. And when he took his goddamn war, he took her name. And I'm damn taking it back.
My thesis is Abel Danger are the terrorist controllers. Mohammed Atta, he can't get through the day. He's got to have money. He's got to have help. Terrorist controllers, case officers, babysitters for Atta. The main consumer of Abel Danger intelligence is Major General Jeffrey Lambert, Special Forces. And he tells them, he says, look, they have a chart with all these Al-Qaeda characters, including Atta, before the fact. And he gets these yellow Post-it notes, and he puts one on Atta's face, saying, that reminds you, you can't share information about him. So they knew exactly who these people were, of course, because they were telling them what to do. Every year there's a drill called Able Warrior, and the theme is only one thing, anti-terrorism. Now if you look at the way that they do this, they have drills in binary pairs. One side pretends to be the defenders, and the other side pretends to be the attackers, okay? So if Able Warrior are the defenders, anti-terrorism, what's Able Danger? Able Danger is a troop of attackers to be used to simulate attacks during anti-terror drills. In other words, those double agents are there as actors, if you like, in normal drills, but then at a certain point, wham, the drill goes live and something happens.
Well, people sometimes say to me, well, what do you have, a conspiracy theory?
The use of conspiracy theory as a derogatory, as an epithet almost, is something that propagandists have perfected over the decades, and it's a useful tool for eliminating articulate dissent and other points of view and information that might be inconvenient for a policy agenda.
Do you think there's some, do you think these people, do you think these leaders are just deliberately trying to manipulate the whole world just to suit themselves? What do you say? Conspiracy theorists. How do you like that? I mean, do you think there's actually a group of men sitting in a room who sit there and are plotting these things? For some reason, do you hear that? You have that up here? You think there's a group of people sitting around in a room? But somehow that image is supposed to be very compelling, you know? So improbable. And I always say, oh, no, they don't sit around in a room. They meet on carousels and they talk to each other that way. Or they do, what do they call it? Free falling. Now, with the parachute guy? They all lock arms. You see those parachutes? What? Skydivers. They all skydive. You see them locking arms. What do you think they're talking about when they're all locked arms like that? That's where they meet. Of course they meet in rooms. Where the hell else do you think they're going to meet?